Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. You can tell that some people just can't hack it when it comes to not having a white media company to hand them a regular paycheck. The folks over at Tiffany Cross and Andrew Rye's little sideshow apparently are doing some real clout chasing. So they were sticking up for Mark Lamont Schill of all people, as if they actually care about the guy. And the person who they thought they were going to take shots at is Joe Budden and his very popular podcast. So they decided to make their contempt clear by putting together a podcast with the title Joe Budden and the Dumbing Down of America. With a title like that, they wanted to make it personal. This is what happens when you let mean girls be in charge of your promotion. But because of the fact that these clowns decided to go after somebody who has a hell of a lot larger audience than themselves, it wasn't long before his listeners lit up the former Breakfast Schlub host and former MSNBC cheerleader, and they were in full retreat. Angela Rye immediately threw Tiffany Cross under the bus, blaming Tiffany for giving the episode that provocative title.
This is Tiff's conversation, but I do want to... this was Tiff's idea. Tiff is ready to claim that, and we're fine. We all weighed in. We all said what we said. But I would just say to them, well played, but I do apologize for titling the podcast
well,
that
maybe
way.
we
shouldn't have done that.
Now, before I go any farther, I think I need to give a disclaimer. I've never actually listened to Joe Budden's podcast. I barely know who he is. I saw that he did do a podcast with one of those video thoughts, Melissa Ford, and that was pretty much all that I needed to see. And if I may put it bluntly, he sounds like he lights up a joint before every one of his podcasts. Hell, he sounds like he lights up some weed before every commercial break. Again, I haven't listened to more than a few minutes of his content, but let's be honest. If you happen to listen to his podcast, am I really that far wrong? Does he do the kind of content that I do? Do you think that there's any overlap there at all? I'm willing to bet that there's not. And that's perfectly understandable. After 17 plus years, you know that I don't care who's beefing with who in the world of hip hop. I don't care about who's dating who either, who's cheating on who, baby mama drama in the world of black celebrity, which seems to be the main thing that he obsesses over. And hey, from what the internet says, he's making money off of it and he's got an audience, and I don't begrudge him that. And the fact that the guy happens to have a large audience, well, it just goes to show how far we still have to go in elevating the mentality of our people. Now, that said, it's a joke for the likes of Tiffany Cross, who's been a mindless sock puppet for the white media, to pretend as if she has more to offer a black audience than, say, Joe Budden does. Tiffany Cross only had her little old gig because she attacks black men every chance she gets. That's why she was so mega triggered by Joe Budden, I suppose. She's triggered by black men in specific. And all her crap about podcast bros, that's just her saying that she's bitter that the white media gave her a platform but couldn't give her legitimacy. NBC had to give Tiffany Cross her show. Joe Budden, no matter what you may think about him, and I've made my estimation of him clear, you can't take away the fact that he's not a product of some white media company. Tiffany Cross, on the other hand, just like Angela Rye, is an invention of the white media. Tiffany Cross made a fool of herself when she attacked Brother Tariq by name, and Angela Rye did the same thing when she attacked Jill Stein because it was obvious Rye was auditioning for a DNC consulting gig, just like Roly-Poly Martin. My real problem, though, and the subject of this morning's briefing is the fact that these self-appointed black intellectuals who consider themselves to be the smartest people in the room have been wrong more than anyone else. These boule bootlicks are inventions of white power. The only reason, and I mean only reason, that anyone knows who people like Angela Rye and Tiffany Cross are is because white power put them on. That's why Mark Lamont Schill's trying to get in good with Joe Budden, make nice with him. He realizes now that he's not going to get another gig on a white media cable network. No show, hell, probably not even a regular guest panelist slot is ever going to come his way again. So he's trying to pivot. He's trying to reinvent himself. Meanwhile, Tiffany Cross is doing her own tired, stale, bitter, broad routine because somewhere along the line, her white paymasters convinced her that angry and smart were the same thing. Only they're not. Hell, she's so asinine and annoying that even Angela Rye was telling her to shut up so she could speak.
No, but it's not even, I'm going to respond to this. It's not even a feeling, though.
It's literally 5 minutes left in the conversation.
Okay, but I want to respond to what he said.
You guys haven't let anybody else weigh in here.
I'll weigh in, but I'm going to respond to this.
But she just couldn't stop herself, and that's because when she was working for the white media, they let her go ahead and spew whatever gibberish that she wanted. She could go ahead and be as out of pocket as she liked, and they wouldn't check her so long as she didn't talk about a white person, which we all know is how she lost her gig at MSNBC. And speaking of losing it, she lost it on that podcast because an internet personality who had said nothing about her, by the way, didn't do anything to her, but she saw his audience and got angry as hell that a black person outside the white media structure she always depended on, and worse than that, a black man, was outdoing her by a country mile, and this was her response: to come unglued and go on an unhinged rant that even her own buddies couldn't get her to snap out of. Just out of curiosity, can anyone remember any time that Tiffany Cross Eyes has had any kind of meltdown and went on a tirade like this over a white person? Sure, she's been griped at for saying this or that, but has she ever gone on a white media cable outlet and then just went on an irrational tirade for minute after minute after minute, divorcing herself further from reality with each insane moment until finally someone had to tell her to shut up? Seems only black men are able to make her lose her mind like that, but why? She thought that she was going to position herself to be the black female face of cable news, just in time for Kamala Harris to be elected president, but that plan failed twice, and now she's been banished, just like Joy Reid and Angela Rye. At this point, they're trying to get clicks and views by attacking someone who's relevant. That's what this is really about, but it backfired. Whatever boost these guys thought that they were going to get didn't happen. Everyone knows that Tiffany Cross and her pals are DNC shills. Soon as the first Democrat comes along and offers them some low-paying gig working for their campaign, they'll be off that little old podcast. This is about them trying to get people to notice them. And this was the best they could come up with. See, family, this is why I warned you in my video about things that make black men look weak, to avoid black men who are always starting beefs online and seeking out people to get into it with. The people who I'm talking about are individuals who will falsely claim, well, I'm going after so-and-so because they're doing wrong or they're misleading the people. Family, that's usually a crock of bull. Internet beefing is the last refuge of the scoundrel. It is never about helping the community. It's always about some self-serving clout chaser who's just trying to help themselves. Internet beefing is the last refuge of the scoundrel, which is why Tiffany Cross and her pals are doing it. And while Tiffany Cross and her pals' jealousy at Joe Budden's success makes sense, their anger at him and trying to attack him on the grounds that he's not an intellectual makes no sense at all. Did he ever say that he does highbrow or intellectual anything? Did he ever claim to offer the highest level of discourse and analysis of the day's events? Or did he make his niche to talk to hip-hop artists and discuss things that are admittedly of interest to a urban audience? That's not an insult, it's just a statement of fact. This is not somebody who's trying to talk to the intelligentsia. He's trying to talk to the proverbial people on the block. His content doesn't challenge his listeners because that's not what he's trying to do. He's not going to be what Tiffany Cross wants him to be, and that's a good thing because nobody wants to be what Tiffany Cross is, a professional DNC butt kisser. She and her pals are whining at this guy because they're jealous and furious. They're not being shadow banned like the new voices of black media are. They've got name recognition, such as it is, right? So why aren't they using it? Because they already tried, and it's not working. Make no mistake, it's pure jealousy on their part, because these people have been on white media TV, and these people have been hobnobbing and bumping elbows with important white people, so as far as they're concerned, they matter because after all, they are the talented 10th, right? They're the intelligent ones, they're the academics, except nobody's listening to them. This is what happens when you spend most of your adult life working for white media radio stations and TV networks with white producers and supervisors who tell you how great you are, but in reality, you're just a token Negro who they squeeze in between commercial breaks. We know that people like Tamron Hall were having a fling with the likes of Lawrence O'Donnell. That happens more than people think in these white media companies. It's part of how you get along and climb the ladder. But what happens when you get fired from these same networks? Then what? You wind up like these people. And sure, Tiffany Cross and Angela Rye can whine that Budden's podcast isn't elevating the mentality of the black community, but guess what? Neither is Tiffany Cross or Angela Rye or anyone else over on that dumpster they call a podcast. No one can lie and claim that they ever learned something that they didn't know or that they got a perspective they hadn't considered after listening to those people. Their audience is every bit as dumb as they claim Joe Budden's to be, and their content makes people stupid by spoon-feeding them propaganda whose only purpose is to make it possible for the Democratic Party to give those guys a job. Nothing they've done has made anyone smarter or more informed. They've only made people more ignorant. This is the incompetent operative class trying and failing to be media gatekeepers. That's what this is really about. This is them making their attempt to say that we can shut somebody down or we can put pressure on them. Well, how'd that work out for them? Nobody cares what they think. Hell, even Charlemagne the Fraud had to go ahead and rebuke what they were saying. Now you know you hit rock bottom when he's the one taking you to task for some of the stuff that's come out of your mouth. You know, if Tiffany Cross truly feels that Joe Budden is so detrimental and that his show is dumbing people down, then why is she even mentioning him? Shouldn't she be avoiding him and his audience at all costs? If I look at somebody's content and I deem it to be lowbrow, dim-witted, or otherwise unworthy, then I'm not going to start an internet beef with them. I'm just going to ignore them because I can't do anything about them anyway. I'm much better off putting out content that does meet my standards than complaining about other podcasts that don't. But Tiffany Cross and her pals are clout chasing. And you want to know something? The so-called content that these guys put out is basically the same shtick as Joe Budden, only they don't talk to any musicians or hip-hop artists. Instead, they suck up to politicians and pundits. They do the same ebonics-laden rhetoric that he does, and nobody can lie and claim that they actually learned anything from Tiffany Cross or Angela Rye. They just do the same stale, worn-out cheerleading for the DNC that they've always done. Just like roly-poly, they're auditioning for a job. They all saw what Simone Sanders did, going from shoveling shinola for Joe Biden, lying about his policies, then getting a job working in the basement of the White House communications office, and after less than a year she was out, but that's okay because by then she had lined up her next gig at MSNBC. All of these boule bootlicks and butt kissers like Angela Rye and roly-poly, they saw what happened with Simone Sanders, and they've been drooling at the mouth ever since, wishing that that could be them. If they just kiss enough DNC backsides, it will be them, or at least that's what they tell themselves. But Tiffany Cross is in no position to talk about dumbed-down conversation. You have to be brain dead or plain dead to think that she has anything intelligent to say. Her problem is that her shuck and jive routine isn't getting the traction that other people are. She's attempting to do her own pathetic impersonation of a commentator who's down, but nobody cares. She doesn't know how to actually navigate in the online space because she's never had to. Instead, these people have always had somebody in the white media who would go ahead and hand everything to them, hand them their job, hand them their platform, go ahead and make sure that they had an audience. That's what they've always been used to. So now that they're actually having to stand on their own 2 feet, they're falling flat on their faces. But keep in mind, this is who the white media has promoted as being the black intelligentsia. These are the black academics and the black thinkers. And look what the hell it is that they come up with. The kind of stupidity that you would get from any other hood rat on a street corner. To the extent that society, especially the black community, has been quote-unquote dumbed down, I wouldn't necessarily lay the blame for that at the feet of the Joe Buddens of the world. I would actually lay the blame squarely at the feet of the Tiffany Crosses and the Angela Ryes and the roly-polies and the rest of the fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools, who call themselves speaking for black people when in reality they only speak for themselves. This whole idea of the talented 10th, that was a cute idea in theory, but in practice, it's been completely and thoroughly co-opted by a bunch of self-serving narcissists, many of whom propped up by our direct enemies. These guys do nothing but cheerlead for whatever their would-be white political paymasters say. They don't have an original thought in their heads because their entire purpose is not to be original. It is to actually be slavishly devoted to a policy slate that came from outside our community and doesn't operate in our interest. Rather than whine about what somebody else said or you don't like what they said to one of your pals, instead what they should be doing is actually building a platform that does speak the way that they think it should be. But then again, all of these cross signals, pun intended, all of these mixed signals that they give, these people don't know whether to spit or go blind. But for those of us in the B1, we know exactly what to do about tools like this. The same thing that they should have done before deciding to kick a hornet's nest. And that is to ignore them. Good day, and B1. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Nico, Rod Spade, FBA Queen, Immigrant B1, and Chris Baker. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.